In this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about Ezra chapter 2. We're going to read verses 1 and 2. Now these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town, in company with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Seraiah, Realiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Banah. I do not claim I read those names correctly. So in verse 2, it gives a list of names of people who went down to Jerusalem to start the process of rebuilding the temple. Something cool is each of their names means something and they kind of coincide a little bit. So I'm going to read you the meaning of each person's name. Zerubbabel means sown in Babylon. Some say seed of Babylon. Jeshua means Jehovah is salvation. Nehemiah, Jehovah comforts. Seraiah, Jehovah is ruler. Realiah, bearer of Jehovah. Mordecai, little man or worshiper of Mars. Bilshan, in slander. Mispar means number. Bigvai means in my bodies. Rehum means compassion. And Banah means in affliction. And so something cool is the order is how I read it, how it is in scripture. And if you say the meanings together, they can kind of coincide. So Zerubbabel, Jeshua, sown in Babylon, Jehovah is salvation. Jehovah comforts, Jehovah is ruler. Bearer of Jehovah, little man, worshiper of Mars in slander, number in my bodies, compassion in affliction. Rehum, Banah, compassion and affliction, was interesting how those words went together. And then worshiper of Mars in slander, sounds like they're slandering God if they worship Mars. Despite being sown in Babylon, Jehovah is salvation, he comforts, he is ruler. So those were some interesting things. Nothing like revolutionary there, but it's always cool to look at the context of the names that are being said. If y'all would like a more in-depth study in the following verses of chapter 2, let me know, because there's a lot of good stuff. But for now, I'm going to move on to chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 1. When the 7th month came and the Israelites had settled in their towns, the people assembled as one man in Jerusalem. That's just a normal verse. People assembled as one man in Jerusalem, unless you look at the words and dig a little deeper. One that is used here in chapter 3, verse 1, one man, is actually the same one that is used back in Genesis 2:24, which says, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." And so this one means more than just they came together. They came together with a single mind and a single purpose, all of them being united in that. Not that they're all getting married, but because of what a marriage does is two people coming together under a single purpose and of one mind, considered before the Lord. This was the same kind of oneness the people of Jerusalem were exhibiting. Chapter 3, verse 2. Then Jeshua, son of Jozadak, and his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his associates began to build the altar of God to Israel, to sacrifice burnt offerings on it, in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. This is just showing that the people of Israel are making the right response. They're starting off this process by dedicating it to the Lord, making sacrifices to their God, as it's commanded in the law of Moses. Chapter 3, verse 3. Despite their fear of the peoples around them, they built the altar on its foundation and sacrificed burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and evening sacrifices. Then, in accordance with what is written, they celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles with the required number of burnt offerings prescribed for each day. And after that, they presented the regular burnt offerings, the new moon sacrifice, and the sacrifices for all the appointed sacred feasts of the Lord, as well as those brought as freewill offerings to the Lord. On the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord through the foundation of the Lord's temple, though the foundation of the Lord's temple had not been laid. So once again, they're making themselves right with the Lord because they are following the law. They're going to do the festivals the Lord has commanded at that time, in that season, and they're going to do the sacrifices required to be right with God once again, because they are sinners, because we are sinners. If you skip down to chapter 3, verse 11, they had just laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord. With praise and thanksgiving, they sang to the Lord. He is good. His love to Israel endures forever. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy. No one could distinguish the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping, because the people made so much noise, and the sound was heard far away. So, something Marty Solomon likes to talk about is looking through circumstances, either through a good lens or a bad lens. So a good eye or a bad eye is what he likes to say. We can view the world with a good eye and have the lens of God and see his sovereignty despite the circumstances, and his will that all should be well. So he's going to restore his people. He is going to make right what is wrong. And we can see that and be joyful, or we can have a bad eye and we can misinterpret motivations. We can think God is against us when he's always for us. We can see hardship as something negative instead of something that's going to bring a good result in our life. And that determines our attitude. And so here you can take this approach two ways. The response of the priests, the older priests, the Levite, the family heads, those who had seen the former temple when they were weeping. You can either take that as they had a bad eye and they weren't being joyful over the realization that this is starting, like we're finally getting to rebuild what was destroyed, and they were being mournful for no reason. They could have lost sight in the fact that God is doing something great now, and instead thinking back on the past with remorse, in the sense that it's not going to be as good as it once was. Or this could be a time of weeping that is prepared for them. Their heart attitude is not negative, but they are realizing finally allowing themselves to fully realize the depth of how destructive their sin was, in the sense that, yes, they disobeyed God, and yes, it brought them away from their land, but also their sin destroyed the dwelling place of God at that time in history. The temple was where the Lord's presence was. And because of their sin and their disobedience to God, that place was destroyed. It almost symbolizes their separation from God because of their decisions. And so seeing that and seeing the new foundation being built, it could have been remorse for their sin, for the consequences of their sin, and the realization that they're probably not going to be able to see the finishing of the building of the temple because they are so much older, and their sin has ruined that, has made it not possible to enjoy the presence of the Lord. So those are just two perspectives you can see in chapter 3, verses 11 through 12. Something interesting in chapter 3, verse 7. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters and gave food and drink and oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre, so that they would bring cedar logs by the sea from Lebanon to Joppa, as authorized by Cyrus, king of Persia. In the 2nd month, the 2nd year after their arrival at the house of God in Jerusalem, Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel, Jeshua son of Jozadak, and the rest of their brothers, the priests and the Levites, and all that had returned from the captivity to Jerusalem, began the work appointing Levites 20 years of age and older to supervise the building of the house of the Lord. In verse 8, when it specifies in the 2nd month of the 2nd year, although they don't specify the specific day, something that could be implied there is not that they wanted to be technically super exact because they didn't want to focus on the specific day, but if you have more of an Eastern worldview, so you were raised in Israel and in that area, the crossroads of the earth, you're going to see numbers more than just logical processions or an amount of things, but it symbolizes something a lot deeper than what a Westerner or an American would see numbers as. Because Westerners think more logical, these are tactful numbers I can see. They represent 2, 1, like that's a symbol. It represents money, it represents possessions. For an Easterner, numbers mean a lot more. And so the Bible actually uses this a lot because it was written in the Eastern world. It was written to an Eastern audience for the most part. And so they're going to make use of numbers that Westerners would not see. So something you could think that's pretty fascinating that goes a little bit deeper is the number 2 for the Easterners means the 2 tablets of Moses, or the law which God gave to Moses at Mount Sinai. And that is found in Exodus 20, chapter 20. So in Ezra chapter 3, when they mention 2nd year, 2nd month, they could be allowing you to see that also, yes, they're starting this process of rebuilding, but also they're doing it with the law in mind. They're honoring the law by doing this, referring to the 2 tablets of Moses. So that's something pretty cool that I would never have gotten if I didn't listen to the Bema podcast by Marty Solomon. You'd love to check that out if you could. So this was just a little quick, brief overview of Ezra 2 and 3. If you want a more deeper study, let me know. But I want to give you 3 helpful tips for your personal Bible study to make things go a little bit deeper than the average Westerner would experience. First, look at the names. Look at the meanings behind the names. Sometimes even with names, the character of God that is displayed in that specific story has something to do with the names of some of the characters. So that's something that you can look into. Number 2, look at numbers. I will link in the description one of the podcast episodes where Monty talks about the meanings behind numbers 1 through 10, but those have a lot of significance in scripture, and it's really cool. Even like multiples, like 4 times 10 is 40, so like there's some implications there that you wouldn't think about. So would love for you to check that out, and I will do a video later about those specifically, so if you want to wait till then, go for it. If not, listen to Marty's podcast. And number 3, look at the heart attitude of the people in the story you're reading. Let's see if their perspective is a good, positive attitude in light of God and His sovereignty, or if it's a bad eye in light of sin and this world and destruction and negativity and selfishness. That can help you grow in how you should respond in situations. And then it can also help you just grow in your understanding of why there was punishment for actions that you thought were good in the Bible and all of that. Okay, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you grow closer with the Lord.